Okay, being 10 o'clock, call this work session to order. And without objection, I would like to recess for a bit and wait for our final member who's running a little late so she can get here. So we will be in recess until Mary shows up. Isn't he voting? So let's reconvene. The first bill is House Bill 601, relative to participation Medicaid direct certification program for free and reduced price school meals. Now, we have somebody who, we held this one because the Senate was having a sick. Harry, please, we're live now. Okay, we held this one because the Senate had a committee meeting and they were going to report out by November 1st, which they've done. As it turns out, Representative Popovici Mueller ended up on that committee, much to his chagrin. Surprise. So I would ask if you would like to report on behalf of the committee from, and you have copies, everybody has a copy of the report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just need a second to get out of my. Okay. So the report should look like this.
You put one at your place, I think.
And to make a long story short, it was very useful discussion on the consequences of making this policy change, and the committee, with an amazingly long name, I believe it was the Committee to Study the Impact on SNAP and Medicaid Changes on Free and Reduced Meal. It was a pretty long one. Basically, we had a very good set of meetings where we all agreed to look at the data in specific ways. And we've had a lot of work done by the various departments, Department of Education, the HHS, by the LBA staff to try to, at best, as well as possible, estimate the financial impact of those policy decisions. And there is quite a bit of data here that I don't really plan to go into a lot of detail on, but I will be happy to elaborate if there are questions. We've heard from all, stakeholders that were willing to testify in the report details who spoke and why. The recommendation was to mostly keep things the way they are and to address a very important issue, which is that based on our discussions, there are two different groups of kids who don't end up in this program. There is the group of parents who feel discouraged by the complexity of the paperwork and just give up on it. And there is the group of parents who simply doesn't want to participate and, has no interest in it. And our major recommendation on that side is to look at, we spoke with the departments, the recommendation is to streamline that form for people who are on Medicaid so that if somebody is already on Medicaid, they should just have a form that says, this is my name, I'm enrolled in Medicaid, go get my data from Medicaid and determine my eligibility for the program. There should be no need to provide redundant information again and again to different state agencies to get eligible for something. Doing so would also respect the right of the parents who simply don't want to be in the program to not want to be in the program. Obviously, there is a minority and a majority report, so I'm sure that you had an opportunity to read it. But nobody disagreed with that particular recommendation. The disagreements were in whether we should go, further than that anyway. Because of the impact on privacy and because of the huge financial impact, I mean, the numbers are staggering, and I'll let Mickey describe, how the, numbers were obtained. I believe that it would be in the best interest of the state to, ITL this bill, and I would like to make that motion when the time is appropriate, whether it's now or later. But I would be very happy to, again, answer any questions about the discussions we had, tell you exactly what the concerns were, and we do have people who are here to provide information.
Can I ask a question? My question is, during our multiple conversations, we talked about the potential of a pilot, maybe doing a few school districts and looking at that using Medicaid direct certification. And using that instead of the free and reduced lunch forms that go out to school parents. So instead of ITLing it, could we perhaps amend it and look at it, or interim study it, amend it, and then run it as a pilot? Part of the issue is we really don't know exactly how many kids we have. An assessment that's been provided of potentially the greatest amount of kids that could be participating in this, but we don't actually know how many. Some may be in preschool, some may be older than that right now. So if we could just at least, instead of ITLing it, at least look at maybe the potential of a pilot with 2 or 3 school districts. So it would be an amended document, bill, and go forward with that. We've agreed that the data that comes is good data, that we would more accurately know how many children are living in poverty in the state of New Hampshire, and we really should try and get those numbers. So if that's a possibility, but I'd also like to at least let us hear from Hunger Solutions so that they could talk a little bit about why this bill is so important, please.
Well, if somebody would like to fill that slot, please join us.
And thank you for being here.
Hi, I'm Laura Milliken. I'm the Executive Director of New Hampshire Hunger Solutions. We have been advocating for Medicaid direct certification. So there are currently 38 states across the country who are participating in Medicaid direct certification. It's a way of streamlining the process of getting kids who are eligible for federal benefits to be fed in school. And we know that the benefits of kids eating in school are many, many, not just for individual children, but for classrooms in the short term, for academic outcomes for the children in the short and long term, and for health outcomes for children in the short and long term. So it's a very good investment in New Hampshire's future to make sure all children are fed in school. The costs that are created through Medicaid direct certification have nothing to do with the certification process itself or the meals themselves. It's all about the state's education funding formula, which uses free and reduced meals as a proxy for measuring poverty. So I completely understand that there are mechanisms that are in place relative to the education funding formula that costs additional cost, but Medicaid direct certification is about making sure that those children who are eligible can access the program. And that, of course, is what we advocate for. I mean, I think that it's a very good investment, even at its cost, because investing in children is really investing in New Hampshire's future. And that the benefits of having children fed are many, many. They're just reams of evidence. I'm happy to provide you with that evidence if you'd like to see it.
Thank you. So I believe that nobody, on the previous committee disagreed with the importance of kids being fed. I mean, there is zero disagreement on that. I just wanted to double check. Do you have, right now the assumption seems to be that if a kid is not on free and reduced, they don't get fed. Do we know that to be the case? Because in my personal experience, which is limited to my town where I was on the school board, so it's just one town out of the whole state, kids were never turned down for food. They may end up with a few dollars in debt at the end of the year because we kept track of it, but the school pretty much wrote it off. So, do we have any data that illustrates kids actually not receiving food at schools, or is it just a general concern because they are not on the free and clear?
I do not have any data about how many children are not being fed. I think probably there are children whose families say to them, please don't go through the lunch line because we don't have the money to pay for those meals. So I think that there's, there are really no methods for measuring those kids. What I do know, and I only know it anecdotally, perhaps my colleagues from New Hampshire Ed could speak to what they're hearing, but what we're hearing at New Hampshire Hunger Solutions is that many schools are incurring quite a lot of school meal debt because of exactly what you're saying, that schools don't want to turn away kids who want to eat. But even though kids might be eligible, the schools are having to pay for it because they're not actually, those kids are not enrolled in free and reduced meals.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for taking my question. So we see here that 7,700 new students with this program would start getting free and reduced lunch. Do you know how many students are currently getting free and reduced lunch, and how much federal funds are coming in for those students?
I don't have the number. Thank you for the question, Representative. I'm sure there are people in this room who have the exact answer to the question. My understanding is there are about 42,000 kids who are currently on free and reduced meals. 100% of the meal cost for those children is reimbursed by the federal government. So that's quite a number of federal dollars that are flowing into the state. And just to be clear, the 7721 that was estimated, those kids are not new students. Those are students who are already being served in school districts. Those are kids who are living in poverty and are being served by schools.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to answer that question because we do have the memo from the Department of Education that has quite a bit of detail on that. And if you look at that other memo that starts with, the one from Mark Manganiello dated 10/20/23, which everybody on the committee should have. If you look on the second page, this is a complicated discussion, but those are the best numbers we have. The enrollment dropped during COVID because of the policy changes on Medicaid eligibility that no longer required recertification and allowed everybody to stay on the program whether they were eligible or not. As a result, there was a drop in FNR enrollment that was larger than the drop in Medicaid because there was no need to recertify. So we tried to project this on the last known year that was solid, which is the school year 2020. Past that, the numbers are getting skewed by the impact of the federal policy changes. So this is the best analysis we have. The memo goes into quite a bit of detail on how it was achieved and what are the assumptions that were made. They're just the best numbers we have available, but nobody can say they're 100% accurate. It's just best effort and the best data we have to work on with it. And I just wanted to clarify that.
Question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we've got this blockage where you have the intersection of I appreciate, Representative Popovici-Mueller giving that the subcommittee supported the idea of, being able to provide a better data for children in order to get free and reduced lunch. The blockage seems to be that number is used as part of the education formula. And the immediate outcome of that right now, as Ms. Milliken was saying, is that schools are accruing debt because of that. I don't see us getting through the blockage right now because of the education formula is so complicated. And for far less than $191 million, is there an opportunity to provide a fund for the state to create in order to reimburse schools for the loss that they incur in providing lunches for them. I mean, that's certainly an entirely different topic, but I don't see us getting through this block right now because of the education funding formula is set and it's complicated. It doesn't seem like it would be a heavy lift in order to reimburse schools for the free and reduced lunch for the children who can have it, and maybe that would open up the avenue for students, or would give the schools some freedom in terms of allowing students who they know need the food, but aren't going through the process for the state. Just looking for a way to get through this now, because I think we need to address this later. We all seem to support the idea of using a better information, the Medicaid information for identifying these students. But right now, I think we're kind of stuck. So is there a way of helping the school and reaching more children who are hungry?
Yes, Ken?
We've talked often about free and reduced, but we never separate them. Free is one level of income, reduced is another. And the thing we most often hear is, oh, the reduced don't pay anything, even though they're supposed to pay something. So some of this is as a result. We've heard examples before us, oh, we're 30,000 in debt because of the reduced population didn't pay anything. And I think there's a confusion among those who are on free and reduced. And does anybody have a number? Does our LBA person know any number of this group is free and this group is reduced? And quite often the reduced group either is not paying what they should be or they're not paying at all. But we're hearing frequently from schools that say we're 30,000 or so many dollars in debt from people who didn't pay on the reduced level. So do you know what those are? Thank you.
The DOE can step in, but I think it's 85% of the number is free and 15% or so is reduced. Is that about, is that close? Do you have copies for? The DOE has data. We can pass that around.
Yes, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to ask, I don't know the answer to this one. Do we have any state level data on the total impact of, school lunch debt? Because I know that in Wyndham, we just wrote it off, we paid for it from general funds and we were done with it. But I obviously don't want to assume that what happens in Wyndham happens everywhere else. So if we have an idea of what the impact is, it would be useful.
Good morning. Kelly Rambo from the Department of Education, Bureau of Nutrition and Wellness. Melissa White, Division Director for Learner Support, New Hampshire Department of Education.
Sorry, I wrote
Sorry.
too slowly.
Melissa White,
Yep.
Division Director for Learner Support.
Thank you.
And thank you for that question. We do not have that data at the department. That's at the local level.
If I may follow up, would it be possible to ask the schools to provide that number so that we maybe have it by the beginning of the next budget process? Because I think it would be an useful, data piece to help us figure out how to fund schools properly, to make sure that no kid who needs food is left without food. That should not be happening. But there are a lot of different ways to do it, and to decide how, we could really use some detail on, what are maybe ask them retroactively too for going a few years back. This is how much we had every year and this is what we did, if it doesn't create too much of a burden.
We could definitely survey the field and request at the local education agencies, voluntarily provide us with any kind of figures that they have for their unpaid. I think the part that we at the department have reiterated a few times is that we know the reduced lunch number. So if we're looking at a number that we're pretty solid with as far as what we would want to cover to meet the needs of students, we're already paying for the breakfast portion. For those students that are identified for reduced, we could pay at the state level for the remainder of that reduced lunch component.
Yeah.
when we get into the specifics of qualifying for some of these other programs and we're looking at Medicaid direct certification, those bring in some different pieces, but that number specifically, we do have, and we do know, and that number you can see there is in front of you. So that's just something that I wanted to bring up because I know that was mentioned a couple of times, like what numbers can we look at to provide the support that we do know that there's a need for.
Can I ask, what number are you using now for total students for the state, approximately? How
Total
many?
enrollment or number of free and reduced?
No,
or-
the total students, how many students
I
are we
think
talking?
we're around the range of 160,000.
Okay, God, that was, because I'm looking at this 40,000, I'm saying, that's pretty close to 25% of the student population.
Yeah.
Wow, okay, thank you. Mary?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for taking my question. If in fact we were to proceed, maybe even with the pilot, in terms of Medicaid direct certification, well, I guess let me do my first question first. If in fact we went to Medicaid direct certification, would it increase the amount of federal dollars being returned to the state of New Hampshire in many areas?
Well, I can only speak to, for what it would do for the department or the local level. Related to food, Melissa can maybe speak to, the other portion of it. But it would go back to the local level. If there were students that were qualified for Medicaid that were not already currently on another program, they would get federal funding. If the state of New Hampshire was to be qualified for the Medicaid for the USDA program.
But we have to be a part of that program. We cannot pilot it. We cannot look
Right.
at it using a few school districts. We have to be a part of that program, have that application accepted by USDA before we could do anything. So if we're looking at trying to do some sort of pilot, we're going to need to pay for that at the state level. But
Okay,
feds
thank
will
you.
not reimburse us for those costs because they do not allow us to use some sort of other type of identification. It has to go through their free and reduced eligible form.
Just to follow up,
Oh,
in our conversations when we had the combined committee with education, we talked about if in fact we were to go with Medicaid direct certification, when individual families were signing up for it, they could be given the option of in fact accepting or saying that they don't want to be part of free and reduced lunch meals. So it wouldn't be that everybody who's identified, it would help the state if everybody's identified is identified. But at the local level, those families who don't want to be determined as such could sign off saying that they were not interested. And they would do that at the time at which they sign up for Medicaid.
So unfortunately, that would be a question for DHHS because the program is operated through DHHS and I don't know the answer
All right,
to that.
thank you.
But I think we just want to also reiterate that we have to be accepted into the USDA program. They have not opened up that application period. They have said this fall they were going to do that. They still have not done that. So we don't even have the opportunity to apply for, to be a part of the Medicaid direct certification program until USDA releases that and does a request for applications for that. And then when they do, we can apply and then kind of move on to these next pieces. But it's difficult to kind of jump ahead or say we're going to kind of create our own system or do some, or our own certification. They are not going to reimburse us for those costs.
Thank you. I just wanted to, I hear you and I remember that we spoke about this obviously, a few weeks ago that the federal rules are, the federal process is the federal process and we don't really have control over it. I do remember that we spoke about it, and I'd appreciate if you confirm if my understanding is correct or not, that if instead of doing direct certification, we are allowing people who are already enrolled in Medicaid to just provide that, one checkbox form to the school and just say, I want to apply for free and clear, instead of giving you the data, I'm enrolled in Medicaid and you have my consent to work through DOE and DHHS and get that data. My understanding is that that may be possible without new legislation it would just be administrative changes because you'd have the consent of the parent to, share that information between the state agencies.
So unfortunately, that would not work because currently in the state of New Hampshire, we are not on Medicaid at the USDA level. So the only programs that we operate as a direct certification are SNAP, TANF, and that is, Medicaid is not allowed for USDA reimbursement. So unfortunately, that method would not work at this moment in time. It could be something that if we were on the program, it could be explored, but because that door isn't open for the state of New Hampshire, that is unallowable.
So just as a clarification, something changed since the time we talked about this a few weeks ago? Because when we talked about it in committee, my understanding and the committee's understanding was that this was a possibility because again, the parent would give you consent to, access their data. So you guys did more research and changed the
Not
opinion?
until we actually are approved by the U.S. Agricultural Department to participate in this program. We can't do that until we're part of that direct certification program. So I think the committee is talking about, okay, a couple steps down the road, when we get to that point, once we've been accepted and USDA has approved our ability to be a part of this program, then we can look at what that would look like. But where we're at right now is we're not a part of it. We wouldn't be able to use the Medicaid direct certification at this time.
We wouldn't, sorry, I just want to clarify because I'm not sure. I'm not asking about direct certification, right? We know that we are not in it. Even if we approved it today, we have no idea when it may happen because it depends on the feds. So leaving that off the table for now, we're just talking about what we could do today. People are already enrolled in Medicaid. The HHS has their data. They already provided the data to the HHS to get, enrolled in Medicaid, right? Is there any roadblock between just allowing a person who already enrolled in Medicaid to tell the school to, connect through the DOE to the HHS and get all that data they already provided instead of using a huge application form for the FNR? That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about.
I just want to clarify, and that the state would then pay for the entire cost of the meal?
I do
Because the
not.
feds would not. That we
Okay,
could
so
not
you are
use that for
saying
the
that we
federal.
could do
We
it,
could do that,
but the
but-
feds would not recognize it.
correct. The state
If-
would have to pay for that cost.
That's new information that I appreciate having. Thank you.
I think the confusing piece might be is that this actual program at USDA is called Medicaid Direct Certification. So I think the title of it can also be confusing as well too. And although you're not speaking to the direct certification portion of it, the Medicaid program for USDA, that little checkbox when we, as the state of New Hampshire, apply for those benefits to be able to use cross interagency, that little checkbox at USDA is not there for Medicaid. So whether it's we're using the information directly certified and we're getting a file and matching, or the parents are simply saying, as you're identifying, that we would like to opt in, or we would like to say, yes, you can use that, and it's not directly certifying. Neither of those two for the state of New Hampshire, as USDA recognizes, to be able to get that federal funding back, is not applicable at this moment in time. What Melissa is speaking to is that if the state would like to go in that direction, the state would need to fund those students or those kiddos that would be on,
it.
that would go into that.
So it can be done, but it's just a question of whether you get federal money for it or you don't. Okay, so that's what's in the balance there. Okay, thank you. I appreciate the clarification.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I might have a little more understanding here. I hate to be the one that says I have no idea what this means. But in the chart you handed out, I can add up the numbers and I get that, but I still don't know what they mean. The 122 million, is that what would you walk me through this chart so I don't have to ask questions?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So to answer your first question, the 122 million at the bottom would be, just for complete reference, if the state was to pay for all meals for all students that are currently, that we have for enrollment in the state of New Hampshire.
When you say all meals, you mean all 160,000 students or all 160,000 students, not the 42,000 who are currently enrolled?
That is correct. The chart above will break it down to the free students. Obviously, that's fully covered by the federal reimbursement. And then the reduced, and it's broken down by breakfast and lunch because obviously those prices are different in the reimbursement that we get from the federal department. So you can see the meals. I'll just go through the columns. The eligible students currently that we have the data for, which is 22, 23. The meal price after the federal reimbursement. So what I did was I took the federal reimbursement less than, so that would be what the cost would be per meal to the state. And then the last column is the total column. You can also see already, to Melissa spoke to this before, that the state is currently paying for the reduced price breakfast for all of those students. So that's why the total cost at the bottom is the 122 million, and it's less that what the state is already currently paying. So you can also see that the total for the breakfast and lunch for free and reduced would be the $873,000. And since the state is already paying 374 of that, the difference would be the 499.
Can I ask some other questions?
Sure.
So the 499, does that still pertain to only the 32,000 eligible students here? Or is that the 160,000 students?
No, that is just for the reduced priced lunch.
So
So
that's,
that's the, sorry. So that's the actual, if you look at the reduced lunch, that's 6,932 students, because the federal government pays for all of the free students. So, so that would encumber all of those students.
so if we paid lunch and breakfast for the 32,000 students who are eligible, then you get the 374,000 plus the 499.
Correct.
Okay, and the 123 is if we paid everything for everybody.
That's
So
correct.
we have one number, which is kind of in the real world, and then we have a very high estimate of if we covered everybody. Is there a way of nuancing that? Because there are certainly a number of people who would not need to pay the whole amount. I'm wondering, is there a way of just being able to reimburse schools for their loss as opposed to paying free and reduced lunch for everybody, even those who actually really don't need it?
That's data that we would need to collect because currently we don't have that.
This is a situation, the more you know, the dumber you are. Mary?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We know that currently there's not a pilot program available to apply to at the U.S. Department of Agriculture. If we choose to ITL this bill at this point in time, we close that option for the state of New Hampshire. If we choose to give permission to the Department of Education to proceed with this in the event that a pilot becomes available to apply for, at that point in time, we can always have a conversation about, do we want to do this or not? But it just seems like we're kind of cutting our options in terms of, number one, we know the data will be better in terms of the adequacy funding. We know that we'll be able to feed more children. So I hate to see us ITL this bill because we will not be even sending a signal to the Department of Ed that if in fact this becomes a reality, they can't even apply for it because they don't have the authority to do it. So I just am disheartened by the fact that we would consider ITLing 601 when it really is putting a roadblock in front of a lot of possibilities.
Mr. Chairman?
If we did apply, how long would it take?
In order for it to go into effect, it would be about 2 to 3 years before, the application process does take a year, and then it would have to go into effect either 2 or 3 years after that.
Thank you.
I have to agree with Representative Murray. I think we're trying to cross a bridge that we're not, You're talking about process. You're saying we got to get in the process. We're in finance. I'm looking at money. And right now, it's a $190 million decision that we don't have in the budget. So if, using this committee as our screen to say that the committee recommended, this is a pretty big bite. So I can appreciate the process discussion, but when it gets down to, are we going to approve 190 million additional dollars in the budget that's already been voted? I can't support it. So I'm with Representative Murray. I mean, we've hit an impasse because it's so complicated process-wise that what are we voting on? Are we voting on a process or are we voting on a budget? And for me, I got to look at the numbers. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure I'm on the ITL point right yet, but,
Well, no,
but I agree with you. My goal is to try to find a solution. And my goal immediately here is to try to find a way to keep this going forward. And I don't know if there's an interim study. I'm uncomfortable of directly moving it forward, not necessarily for the money, but also somehow tying the Department of Education into something that there may be consequences that they're not anticipating that would make it more difficult for Department of Education to do their work. Because we don't know, I just have some hesitation about binding Department of Education as well as binding the budget to this. So I guess, Mickey is sort of our expert here, and perhaps some other people would know. Is there a way to keep it alive, to keep us aware and on top of it, so that as things happen, we can respond to that? I really support the idea, but I'm very uncomfortable with the unknowns in terms of the money and the unknowns in terms of the process.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Two quick things. One, to address the comments from our colleague. I believe that whether we ITL this bill or not, this is not a discussion that's ending. I mean, this is something that's always on our radar. We need to get more information and decide on the right policy. To me, the question about this bill itself is whether this bill should pass. And in its current form, there is no way I can support it, especially since, Chairman Emmerich was saying that the money is not in the budget, as in we don't really, have the ability to pay for it if we pass it. My real concern, though, is when we passed the budget on the House floor, this was already in it. When the Senate changed the budget, they removed it, but they added even more funding through other means. So this 190 million that we are looking to add, we already added 193 plus 11.5 for SNAP. I mean, the money is there. It may not be using this mechanism, but to me, it would be we would be double counting right now if we now change the budget at this point in time. So this to me is a discussion that needs to be part of a regular budget process. I cannot support passing this bill at this time because of where we are in the budget cycle and because of what we just did this spring, where we addressed it the best we could. Can we do better? I'm sure that in the next year we'll try to do even better, but I don't think that ITLing this bill would in any way stop our work in that direction, because I think everybody here recognizes the importance of addressing those concerns in the best way possible.
We've had a lot of stuff about childhood hunger, which I believe is a distraction on this bill. There are no hungry children in New Hampshire and in the schools. My own local district has even solicited for money from various organizations saying there are some children who they don't get paid for, but I think that's a minor amount. We see all the monies that's going for free, and we see the money that should be paid for reduced that isn't always paid. Those are some sidelines. What I want to point out is we're like number 5 or 6 out of 50 states in the cost per pupil. I think it's ridiculous. We're paying more now than some schools are charging for prep schools. We're paying over $20,000 per student. That's ridiculous. And this is just going to be more money? We're already overpaid, in my opinion. I would never support this. Thank you.
Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So am I correct that the amount of federal funds per free and reduced child is roughly $1,000 a year. Mr. Landrigan, maybe you could answer, or? Okay, less than that?
Can you repeat the question?
The amount of federal funds that come for all of these free and reduced students, the 42,000 students, is it work out to roughly $1,000 a year per student?
It actually depends on these numbers here are if every single student ate every
I know what these
single
numbers are.
day.
I'm
So
asking how much federal funds are coming.
it depends on the meals that are claimed for reimbursement.
All right. Yeah, let me ask it a different way. My back of the envelope calculation is roughly $6 a day per student times 175 days. Is it roughly $1,000. Is that correct?
I'm not as good with math, so I'd have to do it out, and I don't want to answer you incorrectly.
Ballpark correct.
Okay, fine. So what we're talking about by adding 8,000 students is maybe we could get another we're leaving $8 million or seven or something worth of federal funds on the table, right? But with our current system, you know, as Representative Emmerich says, it doesn't make sense to spend 200 million to get 8. You see what I mean? Anyways, that's my argument. So these things have to be coordinated with the budget, right? Representative Popovici-Muller is correct here. We have to make a budget anticipating these new students, right? So that it works. I mean, it makes sense at some point to try to do this, to pick up that bit of federal funds, but we can't do it now, right? Because the rest of the budget isn't coordinated with that.
And all we would need to really move forward with the application process is just legislation that would allow us to just apply. I think there's more in this component of it, but any legislation that just allowed us to do the application process to USDA, then we could at least go towards that first step. And that piece of it is kind of like that first step we were discussing.
In your application, would that have to have a dollar value in it?
Because of the way that New Hampshire uses our free and reduced, this is specific to USDA and the reimbursement. So the adequacy portion has nothing to do with the USDA portion of it. So when we apply for that, we would not be indicating that in the application process at all.
Okay.
So, my understanding is by passing 601, what we would be doing would be giving the Department of Ed authority, no money, authority to proceed if in fact a Medicaid direct certification pilot became available, to which no dollars at this point in time would be attached. Mickey, am I right or wrong?
I would want some clarification on what the department just said, because it was my understanding that if the state were to apply for this, I don't think we can say no once we're already applied. It would impact adequacy at that point. So I think we would, I think the department should just clarify the last.
Okay. And I think we're just trying to answer the questions about the process piece, and then there's the financial piece. So that is correct. There is going to be the financial implication for the application process if we are accepted into the program. So because of the way we utilize our free and reduced numbers, it has impacts across the board, whereas other states in comparison that may not use their free and reduced numbers for their adequacy may not have the same sort of kind of issues or attachments or things that kind of impact one another. But because of the way we utilize it across the board, across multiple programs, yes, that they come as a package deal. So I apologize for if I wasn't clear earlier, but.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, thank you for being here. We really appreciate your, information and support. So what happens, is the application binding? That would be my first quick question. Once we apply, we are committed to going through if we get approved? Or is the application just you are allowed to negotiate a deal and then it comes back to the legislature or not?
From the USDA standpoint, is what I can speak to for that, is that if we apply and we get approved for it, then we can move forward. Realistically, back when, I believe this was about 2 or 3 years ago, and I just wanted to make this clear also, is that as the department, this program would not have been something that we would have had to come to legislative for to ask permission. We could have applied for the program. However, there was legislation that was put forward that didn't pass. Therefore, we couldn't apply for the program because we could not go around the legislation. So I just wanted to be clear on that. So when we apply for this program, you are approved for it. And then we, from the USDA standpoint side and getting the federal funding for that, can start to operate the program unless there are other statutes or regulations that are put in place that we would need to then come back and take the next step. Does that?
I'm good. Thank you.
I think the question is, you said we can move forward. Do we have to move forward? If we apply for the program and we're approved, can it be provisional to say, well, now we have to see how it affects the state overall and withdraw from the program?
That would be something that I can ask USDA. I don't know the answer to that question.
Other questions?
I just wanted again, I'm Laura Milliken from New Hampshire Hunger Solutions. I just wanted to throw out that USDA does, or at least in the last cycle, they did allow for a portion of LEAs to be a part of the pilot. It does not have to be the whole state. The scope could either be all schools or a portion. So it's possible to do a small pilot, for example.
Well, what's anybody's pleasure?
Just in case, I thought I made a motion at the beginning, but if the motion wasn't made at the beginning, I'd like to make the motion to ITL 601.
Do you have okay, motion's made and seconded for ITL. All those in favor? Those opposed? 5-4, so we'll recommend out to the full Finance Committee of ITL. And I'm sure we'll have a little more discussion. Okay, this has been very educational. And I think to Representative Murray's point, we seem to be, there's a lot of universes crossing here. And I think we all agree we want to not have hungry kids. But this didn't look like the solution du jour. So, all right, moving along, we have House Bill 620 to set up establishing an early learning department of education pilot program, right? And you're the sponsor.
I am,
Okay,
and if I may,
please.
I would like to make a motion to interim study House Bill 620.
We have a motion for interim study. Does anybody, or is there a second? Okay, Representative Murray seconds. Would you like to make your case?
I would like to make my case. There is a similar bill in the Senate right now, and I have been approached by the New Hampshire Charitable Trust, and the Koch Foundation. They're very interested in the work that's being done here. There's work going on at Health and Human Services. I don't think we're ready to go forward with this program per se, but giving us time to seek more information. I would connect with Senator Whitley. She's, I believe, Mickey, if I'm correct, she is interim studying the same bill in the Senate. So we would use our joint efforts, a committee here, which I would be happy to chair, and come back with a report to the full committee. And at that point in time, it would be only a recommendation either to move forward or not to continue. So I would hope that we could at least invest the time in doing a short-term interim study and come out with a report relative to this program.
Question, yes?
Thank you for taking my question, Representative Heath. Would that interim study also provide an opportunity to consider the fiscal ramifications of an early childhood program?
Absolutely.
I think that information, as a follow-up, Mr. Chair, I think that information could be really helpful in terms of determining whether or not a program, which, you know, we could determine the magnitude of the size, how many students, and, you know, what those fiscal ramifications will be for our state. I think that's really important knowledge to determine whether or not this is something we can achieve and, you know, what the need is. Thank
Yes.
you, Mr. Chair.
I'd like to, right now, do an interim study, talk about the process. What that means is that we will have to reconvene in the fall in order to report out the results of the interim study. Inasmuch as you are the sponsor of this bill and you want to run the interim study, I got a pretty strong feeling of what that report's going to be. So my question is, from a process standpoint, do you need the interim study to do all the things you just said? You can meet with the Senate, you can do all the things you just said, and not worry about, I mean, forget 620, the concept moving forward. For next, it's not going to happen this year. So it's going to, I mean, this term, it's going to be next term. So that's,
Can I respond?
yeah.
If in fact we recommend going forward with the interim study, we're saying that we want to look further into the possibilities of this bill. By ITLing it, we are changing our status. The House passed this on the floor. If we choose now at this point to ITL it, we are now taking away the approval that we had once provided for this. And that's sending kind of two different messages. I'm willing to do the work if we can just interim study. There's no funding attached to this right now. We would be able, we have no figures yet from the Department of Ed in terms of what this would cost. Health and Human Services is working right now. I don't want Representative Mary Jane, would you have any comments that you'd want to make based on your work with Health and Human Services? No? If you would
If
be
you-
okay?
If you'd like to comment, please. Got to turn your mic on.
The idea of a pre-kindergarten program for New Hampshire children has been going on for quite a while. And I think the idea of having an interim study to really start to take a look at what does it mean financially. I don't think we've really done that. Right now, the Department of Health and Human Services does have a pilot program that they are running, but it is very small in just a couple of locations. So it's not going to give us really the kind of information that you might get from an interim study, so that as we look at this in the future, we'll have some better data. So I would hope that we could do an interim study, and I think Representative Heath indicates she's willing to put the time in and the work in.
Ken?
It came to us where the policy decided, we had to find the money. We didn't have any estimates from the Department of Ed. So we're kind of stifled. An interim study, what would that prove? We still wouldn't find the money. The policy's been decided. I hearken back to many years ago, Head Start, similar program. Parents with toddlers loved it, saved a lot of daycare money. But then they went on did a study 20 years later after they started Head Start and said it was a waste of money. Those children didn't learn any better going forward than the ones that were staying at home and then finally went to kindergarten. So it's a lot of money that's going to save people for babysitting, and all the ones that have little children are crazy about it. But it's a lot of money for nothing. That's what that study found out about Head Start. That's why we don't hear any more money, any more talk about Head Start. So what would you do in an interim study? All you can do is say, where's the money? The policy's been decided. I'm against interim study. Thank you.
Yes.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just would like to follow up those comments with a reminder to the committee that we have not seen any fiscal information from the state. So to make blanket declarations without a citation to a reputable source for whether or not this would cost money stands to be, critiqued. And that I think, it's our obligation to consider the data. And if we don't have it, an interim study is a great way to find that data, to reach out to the experts, to combine that information and to put it on the record so that we have information to make a sound decision off of. I think it's an important and worthwhile cause to consider. Our state has obviously been thinking about it for a while, and that an interim study motion does present the opportunity for our state to further that mission and to find the data that will back up the fiscal that we are here to consider. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As a freshman, what timeline do we have if an interim study happens? When would it have to be concluded? It's my first term, so I really don't know.
I think we have to report up by November 1st.
So which November 1st, because it's, okay.
No.
So my point is that if we didn't get the data in the many months we've been waiting for it, what data are we going to get in the next 2 weeks that will justify interim studying it? I mean, seriously, what are the odds? And without data, what's the point of interim studying? Because we seem to all agree that the data is needed and it's not.
I'm talking
nowhere.
about next year.
Next year.
Oh, next year, a full year. Oh, there you go. Thank you.
Yes.
And there are agencies right now that are very committed to looking at a pre-K program in the state of New Hampshire. They're willing to participate and provide information. Health and Human Services is currently working on a pilot that will bring some more information. And I think some of the information that can be brought forward by places like the New Hampshire Charitable Trust, the Koch Foundation, can provide information that we previously didn't have that we can apply to what an overall cost would be. So I don't see any harm in an interim study. There's no dollars attached to it. We'd be pulling in people that would be willing to help us look at this and come up with some recommendations. We have till November 1st, 24. And I think that gives us time to come up with a good report that we can provide to you. I see no harm and no dollars. I see more benefit than harm. Thank you.
Okay, so a motion been made and seconded for an interim study. All those in favor? Okay, four in favor, all opposed. 5. So we'll report out to full finance ITL for interim study. Anything else for the committee? I gave you all, or you, actually Janet did, a document, look like this, that that's for next week. We're back here next Tuesday for full finance.
Is it appropriate for us to make a formal vote for the ITL? Because I don't believe there was a formal motion. And if we're going to be passing that recommendation forward, I think we probably should have a vote on the record.
Very good point. Thank you. Can I have a motion for ITL?
Mr. Chair, I move to ITL Bill 620.
Okay, second? Harry seconds it. All those in favor of ITL? There's 5. All those opposed? 4. Thank you for keeping me honest. Now, next week in finance, Mr. Chairman, when we have bills that were 9-0, do we need to spend a lot of time on them, or we just have to vote them?
I hope we can move quickly because of the 33 bills, 25 of them have been incorporated in HB2. So I want to put them on consent. Clerk said no. Everyone has to go to a final, has to have a roll call.
Thank God I'm not the clerk there.
We'll be sitting there to do a roll call for 25 of those bills. Hopefully the lobbying is speedy. The lobby will support it in its speed. We got to do that. Then we got 7. 8. So it's going to be very time consuming.
Procedural.
That's the requirement.
I'm not the clerk on the full committee, thank God.
So one of them, we waited a while, because it's going to be the final report, that's the one with the extra
Easy peasy.
money. People that were in the period of time, 2001 to 2011, that were thought to be given a raw deal on retirement. So they're going to have, there's a commission meeting, once the commission report is in, we will have 436 sitting there that we could, that might be one we would do interim study on. Therefore, there would be a mechanism to put the numbers in that would come from that commission. One of the reasons we're meeting as late as we are.
So it's not going to go as quickly as we thought? Okay,
After this, I'd like to have a caucus with the Republicans.
okay.
Maybe we can request limiting severely discussion when it's a unanimous decision one way or the other.
Hoping we all understand. House Bill so-and-so, moving expedient. Second, call a roll. House Bill so-and-so, inexpedient, call a roll. Inexpedient, call a roll. Good luck with that. I'm hoping we can do that, because it's all our. 33 bills.
Oh.
Keep it down. Couple of minutes of bill for the 25, or none of us have been pushing for because they've been taken care of. So there are other ones that will get more expensive.
Well, my point is, if your name appears as the representative that made the motion, you may be asked to make a comment. You don't have to make a comment. It's really up to the chair.
Well, you do have to write a blurb, though. So.
No,
No?
the blurb has to be, well, the same blurb could be done 25.
Oh, okay.
Unnecessary incorporated, unnecessary incorporated, unnecessary.
Mr. Chair, before we adjourn for the afternoon, may I just apologize to you and to the members of the committee for my tardiness today, as well as for my coughing fit, which I assure you are unrelated. But I do apologize for the delay today.
That's all right. We waited till 10:30 and we said, well, we know you'll get here soon, so. Anything else? Then we are adjourned at, what is it, 11:30.